Hi everyone, it's Tess from teachwithtess.com. Here on my channel you will find all things Wales English, ESL teaching online, and of course working from home. Now I'm here to introduce the third instalment of the Wales Teachers Talk, and we had a great session yesterday. I was chatting to James, Jeanette and Penny, who are all really good teachers of peer-to-peer, and we thought this would, can you tell it's a bit windy, and we thought this would be really useful for those who are maybe wondering if the sort of peer-to-peer that they're doing is the most effective, if it's adapted to the level of classes that they're teaching. So we just got together and had a really good discussion about the various types of peer-to-peer and ways of engaging students in the classes at Wales English. So I really hope you find this interesting. Enjoy. Hi everyone, it's great to see you again. So this is our third instalment in the Wales Teachers Talk series, and today I've got Jeanette and Penny with me, and hopefully James appearing soon. And we're going to be talking about using peer-to-peer in class at Wales English, because it's something that they put a huge amount of emphasis on, and it's always something that teachers ask about or wonder if there's things that little tips and tricks they could use to make it more effective, more fun, etc. So I thought we could talk about today using peer-to-peer in the various levels that Wales English teach. We're going to start, because Penny can only stay with us for the next sort of 20 minutes-ish. Boo. And so we're going to start, because Penny's a bit of an expert on the higher level. So sort of we're going to start talking about grade 3, G3 and above, and the use of peer-to-peer in those classes. So Penny, what's your experience teaching this level of student, and how do you integrate peer-to-peer in these lessons?
So I teach G3 and G4 in addition to the other levels. And I remember my first G3 CRC class, and it felt very in at the deep end. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, because you're used to quite structured classes with the G1 levels and short sentences, but then suddenly you've got lots of text to read and draw them out on. So yeah, definitely I think peer-to-peer is a bit of a lifesaver with those classes, because it sort of takes the pressure off you speaking and the students can talk independently.
Yeah. And Jeanette, you also teach these levels, don't you, the higher levels?
Yes, I do have a few classes at those levels. It's great because generally at that level their vocabulary is more advanced, but equally I have one particular class where they just are too shy to talk to each other. If I have them alone before class, or if one is late, then they're very chatty, but together they have nothing to say to each other at all unless I drag it from them. So that's quite hard work sometimes.
So what do you do in those circumstances? So, you know, I teach G4, G3, G4 as well. I've got a G4 CRC class. I've just started talking, and they are a dream. You know, I just sit there, talk, and off they go. But what do you do, Jeanette, to encourage this sort of level to start talking?
I've been quite lucky recently, because I have had a few minutes of both of them alone. Last week, one didn't come at all. Another class, the boy came very early. So I've actually had time to say to them, okay, now I know you actually can speak very well. You can communicate very effectively. Do it in class. And I mean, obviously, I still script out questions for them. I'm like, can you ask this to your classmate? Can you ask this? But I'm trying really hard to get them away from scripted questions, which is, we're getting there. We are getting there, but it's a slow process with these two particularly. They've just booked a second class every week with me, so we're now doing 2 courses. And the new course, they're going to find it easier. I've suggested that they actually come down a level, and they have. And because they're now more confident in the work they're doing, it's freed up that pressure. So they can now talk a bit more confidently, because they're a bit less afraid of making mistakes. But it is just a lot of encouragement. One of them didn't want to have his camera on, but I've kind of said, look, you really do have to have your camera on, and that helps, because if we couldn't see him, the girl didn't want to talk to him. He wasn't there to talk to. So making sure he's got that camera on and he's actually looking at us has made quite a big difference.
That's a
I
very
mean, even with that level, I still bring out my sock puppets as well.
Ooh.
I mean, these are great for the little ones, but even at that age, I'd be like, this is what I want you to do. I know you understand because you've spoken to me in great detail. So I know you know what I'm telling you to do. You do this, you do this, get on. So I actually get quite tough with them now.
I like your gesture at the end with both.
I do. This is, I mean,
get on with it.
This is what I do. It's like, I mean, I don't want to, I'm just trying to think of random names here. Let's go with Sam and Ellie, okay? So I'd be like, Sam, you are Sam. Ellie, you are Ellie. Ellie, Sam.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And then I would actually have the conversation. I'd be like, hi, Sam, how are you today? Or whatever I've just called this puppet.
Yeah.
And hi, I'm very well, thank you. And making them say hello to each other, making them say goodbye to each other. They weren't doing that before. And now it's like, okay, we're in class. Hi, Ella, how are you today? Hi, Sam, I'm fine, thank you. What did you do? So I'm literally getting them to do that chit chat that isn't actual lesson time as well. I hope we get there because my others, I can't stop them talking.
Yeah, it's interesting.
One extreme to the other.
And that's a different problem.
Yeah. And Penny, what sort of, you know, for people who are starting, because that was really useful, Jeanette, hearing how you sort of are quite tough and make them do this. What about you, Penny? What are your sort of top tips for getting, because the sort of peer-to-peer you obviously do at those higher levels is very different to what we're doing in pre-K. So what sort of, how much guidance do you give them? How much scaffolding? What sort of advice could you give to teachers who are looking at this level and wondering how to use P2P?
I think it still needs scaffolding because I think a lot of the time they don't naturally get on that well. Like the pairings, sometimes the pairings are great and they like you'll log in and they're already chatting to each other, sometimes in English, and that's really nice. That's no problem. But I've had some pairings, like especially like boy-girl pairings when they're about 13, they often feel a little awkward with each other. So in that case, I'll be like, oh, could you ask a question about this picture? Or could you phrase a question about the beginning of the chapter? So you sort of really giving them something specific to ask about. And then with the vocab words, because you get quite challenging vocab during the lesson, definitely be like, could you ask a question using this? Could you make a sentence using these 2 vocab words? Like at the end of the class, revisit them.
They were really interesting points you made just then, Penny. And we were just, James, to sort of put you back in, bring you into our conversation. We were talking about using effective peer-to-peer at the higher level, so the grade 3, G3, 4, CRC, CEC, REACH lessons. And Penny just gave some really good tips. I mean, from my perspective as well, I've just, with my brand new G4 CRC class, I gave them quite a lot of scaffolding right at the beginning in our first lesson and ask them to ask questions, give opinions, and then ask an extension question on top of it. And that worked really well because I was, it really made them have to think. And if their question was too simple, I said, let's get it a slightly more, what about using the right tense or this or whatever. And that worked really well. And I also, I'll also ask them to give an overview of the book that we're reading, for instance. Things like that, which just makes them talk. And then we'll ask them to explain, questions such as, could you tell me why you think that? Or can you explain your opinion or things like that. And so I sort of scaffold to a degree, but it tends to encourage them to speak quite a lot. Have you got any?
I think that's...
Yeah, sorry, Penny.
I was going to say that's a good idea to teach them quite like formula extension questions.
Yeah.
Like, why do you think that? Where did you find that in the text? And the sort of questions they can just tag on to whatever they're asking, but it will extend the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. James, do you teach that level?
I think when I have the first lesson, it's always the most challenging because no matter what level they're placed at, you usually find there's quite a lot of variance within that. So usually the first lesson, I have a lot of extra pre-prepared questions that I can pull out. they usually run the same theme. You know, why do you think that? How do you think the character felt? And then obviously after the first or second lesson, you begin to gauge where the student's at. What, you know, I've got one student, for example, who can use passive voice, you sort of spontaneously. It was about the prison guards thought that the children had stolen, and so she was expressing very high level sort of thoughts. So the questions I was asking were pushing those buttons, trying to get her to use more grammatically complicated structures in her answers. I just have found that you if you're very responsive to the student's level, it's much more effective. But when you begin, you don't feel confident enough to do that. So when I started, I was quite rigid with what I was going to ask and what I was going to get them to do. And now I'm sort of more confident. I'm more relaxed about, let's say, this bit of the conversation is going well. Let's extend this for as long as they want to continue talking about this.
Interesting. I'm just bringing it back to Penny, James, because she's got another few minutes with us and then she's teaching. So
No.
we haven't got much on, and still no sign of Jeanette's internet, so I really have no idea if she's going to be able to come back in. Penny, what else, any other really, you know, what James brought up about this different, you know, the levels and the different levels in classes, it happens quite a lot. What do you do about that? How do you get peer-to-peer to work at that level with differences?
Yeah, I found in the lower levels, in the G1 levels, I think that sometimes making sure it seems fair throughout the class, so they each get an equal opportunity to learn, read and answer questions and ask questions, but often the one that's struggling, I'll give them the question to ask, and the one that's advanced, I'll give them the answer a little bit more, just so that they get time to express. I noticed it like G3 up, like if they're different in ability, they're also different in concentration. So I see them sneaking off to do something else. Like you see their face freeze and they're playing games or something. So I think it's important to oh, Jeanette's back, that's good.
Jeanette's back. Sorry, carry on.
It's important to get to know them as people, because I think the minute you engage with them in their personality, like I had one class where the boy was really good, he was very diligent, very prepared, super student, so keen, and he was paired with a girl who was really into gaming, and he could tell she was a little bit naughty, and like you could tell there was this dynamic. But I think when you got them to engage with that and to ask each other questions about their hobbies, you know, the fact she liked gaming and he liked sport, and you sort of brought them together, it really improved after that, because it was less just class academic.
Did they end up becoming sort of friends, and sort of were they a pair that would start talking to each other before class in English?
Yeah, they did. Good. Not hugely, not super chatty, but they certainly were like, it was awkward in the beginning, but by the end of the 30 weeks, it was quite nice, friendly, and I think they miss each other now because she's not renewed, but he's with a different classmate.
Interesting. Okay. And
that's strange when that happens. Sorry, no, I was just going to say it's strange when you lose one of them and you keep the other one, and usually it's someone you don't know anyway. So then it's a bit peculiar for you, because you've got this relationship established with someone for maybe up to 30 weeks.
I felt bad about that the other day, because I had it was a G1 class. No, wait, G2 now. So he's done G1, GA, same partner. So it's like a whole year, isn't it? And then he's just got a new partner, and this lad was older than him, but he was quite a lot shy, like more reserved, I would say. And it was a shame, because we were chatting, and then this other one was like, but I was trying to draw him out, but then he turned his camera off and it made it worse. And then I could hear my original students saying, where's he gone? Anyway, they've swapped partners now, so they're not together.
I don't know what I missed. Sorry, I dropped
Don't
out. We had a
worry.
big storm here last night, so I guess things are a bit weird at the minute. But sometimes it's actually quite good for them to swap partners too. I had a little girl, started pre-K, did pre-K, GK with one. Great pair. I thought they were really well matched. They talked, they were chatty. He dropped out. She carried on with a new partner. She talks even more, and her new partner is actually a better match, and they have a whole new level of conversation. And she's more confident now, because in the previous classes the boy was the dominant one, but then she'd got to know me and built up that. So then going into the new class, she was able to then be, oh, I know what I'm doing now, which gave her that kind of edge. And they've really, I mean, I listen to them before class when they don't know I'm listening, and they're just in English.
Oh, in English?
In English, which is amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, and I mean, they're very cute. They're only 5 or 6 as well, so to hear them chatting in English like that is incredible.
It's nice to feel that dynamic change, isn't it? When it changes for the better, you're like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What happens? I mean, this is an interesting, because I've got a G2 class that I teach, and most, they do 2 classes together, one with me and one reading with somebody else. And recently, the boy has started to be quite. He's quite, he's quite off the wall anyway. He's that sort of, his thought process will go off in places that I've never even gone to, and he never ever, shuts up. He'll just go and go and go. And he's recently started to be a bit unkind as well to the other students. So we were doing peer-to-peer, and it was the class on character traits, and so let's use some character traits. Maybe that was going into dangerous territory. She was, he's kind, he's thoughtful, he's generous. She's mean. She teases. And the girl's face just dropped. Have you had to deal with this sort of thing? And have you got any tips? Because I think everyone has heard of this happen. I don't know who wants to add to that.
I might have to go. I'm sorry.
Can you go?
I was like, I don't want to interrupt because then you have to edit it weird. So
Nice to meet you
worry.
briefly. I'm sorry I got lost.
thanks for having me.
It was lovely.
Nice to
see
see you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
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 Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I have a pair of boys who they're doing a GKB, but they're well able for the next level up, and I had suggested they go up, but I'm quite glad they don't, because they didn't go up, because now we really extend and we have a lot of fun. But one of them, they get on great. They're kind of friends. I don't think they know each other in real life, but they're very chatty. But one is the one who slightly pushes, and usually it's role play, so they're acting out other characters and like, oh, I don't like you. But I mean, I have said a few times in feedback, make sure this doesn't tip into real life here, guys. And we're teetering on the edge of him just not quite going far enough that it's going to upset his classmate. But it's hard because the classmate is more serious, and he wants to do the right work as well as the extensions. He wants to make sure he's meeting the target language, fitting the frame sentences, whereas the other one is all about how can I make this more interesting, more exciting, bigger, better. So I'm trying to encourage them both to extend while making sure that the other one knows he's ticking the boxes. But then the more lively one is definitely on the verge of letting his role play character upset his role play mate, kind of thing. I'm watching this one. I haven't got to the point yet that they've actually been mean. I have another class that has just finished. One of the boys probably had some kind of learning difficulties. I feel he's on the autistic scale. We've discussed that a bit. And he'd sometimes write things on screen like, you are a pig. And it's like, that's great that you've written that so well. Your writing is awesome. You've phrased this word. It's a proper sentence. But can you not call your classmate a pig in class, please? So again,
what about you, James?
Well, I had a fascinating experience with a pair of twin boys. and that was a very bad pairing.
Really?
Yeah, you think, oh, they'll get on great, but they basically decided between them to play the game of how can we torture the teacher. So
And how did they?
oh well, just
no.
the usual stuff, pretending they can't hear, pretending there's tech problems when there isn't, and there isn't problems. If they'd been in separate classes with another partner who they didn't know, I think it would have been better. A bit of uncertainty about the other student is actually quite good.
Yeah.
And again, back to changing classmates after a period of time. It's great when they stay together, but sometimes they stay together too long.
Yeah.
And I mean, go on.
Sorry, no, carry on, Jeanette.
I was going to say, rather than actual out and out meanness or unkindness, my bigger problem, or something I experience more often, is when one is kind and nice and pleasant, but dominant and always wants to answer, doesn't stop interrupting, won't let the classmate talk, feeds them the answer, talks over them. That's something I see in quite a lot of classes, and more so than actual unkindness.
How do you deal with that usually?
I try really hard not to mute. I don't like using the mute button unless I really have to, and sometimes I really have to. I don't usually use it without warning them either. So sometimes I say, if you really can't keep quiet, then I will mute you. Something that actually works quite well, even with older students, is when I actually look at them and go, James, and then they will go. Sometimes at that point they even mute themselves, which is quite nice, because it's like they are aware that they must not interrupt. It's like sitting on your hands, isn't it, kind of thing. So that does have some effect. Swinging it round sometimes to get them to ask more questions. If I have one that wants to answer everything, then I'll go, hold on a minute, Jason, ask Kat a question. So that he's then still getting to talk, he's still getting to think, because he'll think of his own questions, but then suddenly he's actually asked his classmates something. The problem then is, now stop talking and listen to her answer it, which is like a secondary problem that rolls on. And then sometimes I will be, look, you are still interrupting, so now I am going to have to mute you. But I mean, I'm really not keen on the mute button. I know a lot of teachers think it's their best friend, but I don't want to shut them
frankly, I prefer to have that problem of too much interaction.
Exactly.
Because I've had the opposite, when neither student wants to speak. and that is living hell. Because I've experienced it a couple of times. They're both prepared to read the text, and then they think job done. But then it's refusal to do peer-to-peer. It's or it's a one-word answer. Despite, please, can we talk in complete sentences? We're practicing English. This is important. Have you had any breakthroughs with that kind of problem, and finding a way to get less engaged students to speak more to each other?
With some students, yes. The pair I was talking about before you came in and after before I got cut off and disappeared, I have one pair that are very reluctant to talk to each other, and they have just started a second course with me at a lower level. And I was just saying before you came that now they're more confident with the work. I think they will talk more, and I know they can both speak, because they speak to me independently when the other one isn't there. But going back to younger children, I had a pair that I started with when they were 4. One of them dropped off, the other kept going for, she's now on to her 3rd or 4th course with me, with a new classmate, and she's gone from saying nothing. I mean, she was 4 when she started. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't focus. Now she is chatty, she wants to read, she's engaged. So sometimes it just comes with time, especially when they're young. And I think this is something that I see on our teacher forums, that people forget. When they're only 4 and learning a new language, of course they can't say much. They don't have the language to say much. But patience and free courses on, and I'm getting peer-to-peer and interaction. And I actually had a video clip I wanted to share with these two talking, because they're just incredible.
Otherwise, what I was also wondering, because all of this has been really, really interesting. I was also wondering about teaching, when we're teaching those slightly lower classes. So let's say pre-K, GKA classes. What sort of peer-to-peer do you use there, and how do you make it effective and not too repetitive? Because if it's a reach course, it's quite, you've got a lot of set questions. What sort of things, James, maybe could you discuss or talk about your little top tips for those lower levels?
I think anything which makes it fun, and those levels really respond much more to props, puppets, anything visual, anything you can do which is silly. Get out. I've got a guitar. I've even got a little guitar I can play. Just trying to get them to engage emotionally. And once they're engaged emotionally, they're more likely to try and speak. That would be my suggestion for the younger students, and quite the reverse, for the older students. I don't give stars to 13-year-olds because it's patronizing.
And it's when I started my G4 class, I did actually ask them, do you like stars? And they just looked at me.
I just give them at the end in case they might be useful to them one day. But again, I mean,
you can give them out ironically at that point.
Yeah. I'll make them give them to each other. It's like, what can you give your classmate a star for that I haven't thought of yet today? But again, even with the little ones, I mean, I don't have any pre-K classes at the moment, but I had nothing but pre-K for my first term of Wales, if you like. And even just my response to when they say something, I mean, they don't need stars if they've got a teacher who is genuinely impressed and excited when they respond well. And again, my sock puppets are my absolute I have big puppets, but they're more clumsy and a little bit more awkward, and I don't use them as often. But these, I mean, even if you're a complete beginner and you're new in class, you can still, again, Tess, this is you, Tess. Okay, James, hello, Tess. Hello, James. Hello, Tess.
Yeah,
and
it absolutely works.
And it works. It completely works. And even if they don't know what they're saying, like, I mean, again, if I'm like, James, how are you? James. And then they'll say, how are you? And then up will pop Tess, and I'm fine, thank you. Or happy, as we were discussing the other day. So, and then they do eventually, then they understand because they're doing it and they're always having the same routine of it. And then, I know why we're saying this. And you can see when it suddenly dawns on them what they're doing and why they're doing it. And they don't need the socks anymore. Sometimes we have naked socks. I mean, it's like I can't be bothered to put them on all the time. Then I'll be like, James, Tess, hello. And even that, it's so effective. And when I'm trying to explain class rules at the beginning, I'll be like, I want taking turns. Tess, James. Tess. Tess, James. No. Tess, James. And
it really works, isn't it? And it's interesting, Jeanette, because I was thinking about this earlier before we had this conversation, is in fact for these lower levels, it's really, setting expectations very clearly on what peer-to-peer is, and modeling. And, when you start, I've got pre-K who are just on fire with peer-to-peer, because day one, even if they could hardly say 3 words and didn't want to talk, it was the same thing. So, my gesture is sort of like, so Harry, can you ask? And it's let's
Yeah.
ask and let's ask. And they see these same sort of TPR
Yes.
gestures,
Yeah.
and they just get it.
Mhm.
And I've got my equivalents, which is a boy and a girl, you know, and they talk to each other. And if you're
Well,
consistent,
I use
it really
this is
works.
actually mine's actually a green
Yeah.
screen.
I saw.
It's not on. It's not on right now.
No.
But usually it's darker in here with
Yeah.
proper lighting, so
Yeah.
I can turn that on and stick some fun stuff behind me,
Mm.
which usually lights things up if if it's
Yeah.
getting a
Yeah.
little boring. So that's yeah, I do things virtually. But
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. I don't know how many people actually use the green screens, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I've ever
No.
tried because I'm never confident enough of
No.
having extra technology
No.
going on. But I mean, I have things around me,
Yeah.
and if you said to me,
Yeah.
find me this,
Yeah.
I'd probably have it in reach.
Mm.
But actually, I've challenged a friend to that once, and he went, "Get me a washing machine." I'm like, "Oh, no, here it is."
washing machine, nice.
So I was just wondering, you know, the other thing that I found that works really well in involving students and getting them to work together is using their pen. So, for instance, talking about the lower levels in pre-K, you know, they'll often at the end of it, they've got several slides of peer-to-peer when you're repeating the same question and their toys or their animals or whatever it is. And I often say, right, so Johnny, can you circle a toy for James? And so they circle a toy, and then I say, right, so Johnny, can you ask James how, you know, which toy do you like, or whatever the question is? And so they're really excited to see what toy they're going to be given by the other student, and then they'll answer and then do the same thing. So I use that pen more and more and more to get them actually engaged together. Works well.
I find it works quite well for getting them to start asking questions. But I might say, "What's this?" and circle this. This is very low level when you're still at the "Who's this?" or "What's this?" and circle. And then I'll be like, "Your turn," circle. And then all they then need to do is circle another character or another object. "Who's this?" So it is quite a nice way to introduce asking questions at a very, very low level when it's only "What is this? Who is this?" or "Where is ship?" or "Where is this? Show me," kind of thing.
Yeah, James.
And having been through the I'm mostly doing G1A, G1B, G2A, 2B with Reach at the moment, I'm seeing patterns appear in which lessons are most effective for the students.
Yes.
And you know, I was just trying to remember the name of it. Do you remember the one with hide and seek? You know, the owl, and there's hidden insects in the pictures, and they've got to find that sort of stuff. They really respond to very strongly because having little tasks all the way through. Obviously, they've got to be language related, not just finding stuff. But you know, you say the name of the animal, they find it. They really like that. Children having a clear task that they can. So I've noticed that those things which I see them respond to sort of fairly predictably, which is also the flip. You may want to edit this out, but the flip side of that, is sometimes you know a lesson's coming up, which is going to be a struggle. So you know, because they don't respond as well to, let's say, comparing and contrasting, talking about different genres. It doesn't engage them on
but even with different students, the same lesson is very different. I teach we've just come to the end of Reach GKB, and I've had two students for two sets of pairs on the same lesson every week for the full 30 weeks. So I have my pair at 10 o'clock, and then I have my pair at 12 o'clock. Their classes are as different as you could imagine. The first one, they are so chatty, they extend, they have full conversations, they think of their own questions. The second one, I am
Yeah.
Give me something. I'm pulling it from them. And very, very different. And again, something particularly with the more advanced students with peer-to-peer, I get them to check each other. So once they're asking each other questions, then I'm throwing it back to them. Was that a good answer? Are you happy with that answer? Like, do you want to know more? Tell me more. And then they'll say, oh, tell me more. Say, no, I don't think that's a good answer. Why isn't it a good answer? Or why is it a good answer? So getting them to constantly listen to each other, because that's another thing, of course, with peer-to-peer. To actually get them to stop and listen to their classmate is a whole different ball game to getting them to talk to their classmate.
Yeah, I quite agree. That's a really good point, Jeanette. It's funny, I've got a G2A ORT class, and they know each other anyway. And they'll sit there, and when they have to discuss the subject or the story, I say, I started getting them going by saying, right, I want you to say, so Johnny, what do you think about that? Well, Elsa, I think that, and they love that. So they get ready, they get their, sort of and off they go, and they will chat and chat and chat. But it's, it's always a question of giving them, putting it back on them, and, getting this teacher talk time, student talk time. That was the wrong way around. Student talk time, teacher talk time, balance right. And, there are times when you just sort of get to the end of a class thinking, what was that all about? And then there are times when it's just an absolute joy and it all happens. And I'm fiddling with this. Some of my favorite things are these, and I put these in the teacher group.
Yes, I have just pulled mine out as well, actually. They're not a bit more basic wonderful than yours.
Yeah, but they work, don't they? Because I put my spinner on and, which number. And then pull up. They have to.
Usually it's enough to just show them this one and say, just think of a question. Again, with the slightly higher levels. With the younger levels, role play is great. My favourite classes are ORT and CRC. That's no secret among Wales staff. But give me a page of Biff and Chip, 2 students. They might not even be Biff and Chip. I mean, do you remember the story about Floppy and the skateboard? Well, I had 2 students. One was the skateboard, one was Floppy. And they talked. I kid you not, they would have kept talking for 10 minutes if I hadn't had to stop them. Like, so skateboard, how do you feel about having Floppy on you? And then off goes skateboard. Well, could you go a bit slower? This is a bit dangerous. I'm scared. And Floppy's like, oh, this is fun. So
that's
even give them inanimate objects. And I have some students who don't want to be the characters. I'll say, will you be Biff? Will you be Chip? No, I want to be the robot. No, I want to be the window. It's like, okay, be what you want to be as long as you have a conversation. So I'm not the kind of teacher who makes them fit what I want. I try to fit what they want, because at the end of the day, as long as they're talking English, I don't care if they're a window talking or if they're Biff talking. If they're going to say more, if they're a skateboard or a window or a robot, rather than argue, I don't want to be Biff again, I don't want to be Biff again, I don't want to be Biff again. But they can say, I am a robot, I have nice new paint, Dad painted me. It's got to be more useful to meet them and let them have some control of their own learning. I think because I've homeschooled as well, I think it's quite important to recognise that if you give a child some control, they're more interested and they're more enthusiastic because they know that they're making some of the decisions in the class as well.
Now, I think that's
sorry. Go ahead, James.
It is definitely important to, which is why I try and do things like give options if we're going to play a game. Would you like to play this or this? And then they'll have an argument about the game. But that is, but that's good, right?
It's the best thing when they argue. I feel I've really hit a good point in my classes when my students can argue with each other.
So sorry, James. What were you thinking of a particular example?
I was just saying that the main thing is if you can give them agency, I think, in this process, and the more you can get them to take over, I think, as Jeanette made very clear, getting them to own it means that they are more likely to want to get excited about it and want to do it. So I don't have an example, but I think Jeanette had some great examples there. But
Yeah, no, you
just
did. It was great.
just the general point that but it doesn't always work, and
No.
you have to be honest. Sometimes you can do your best,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
it's still a struggle. And at those times, I think perhaps that's something we could talk about. I don't know if you want to talk about it now or another time, but that you do have those times when you feel like nothing is working, because I have, at least when I was when I started this a long time ago, I had the tendency to fill silences by chattering and starting to explain things that were probably unnecessary. And then I realized that was actually a result of my own anxiety. It wasn't actually for the students. So now I've begun to embrace silence more, a bit like therapists sort of sit there and wait for this.
Yeah, that's something that the trainers advocate as well, isn't it? Like Jake particularly, he's like, let's sit in silence. Something I would do sometimes is like, I'm going to have some tea, you talk to each other. And kind of, I don't turn my camera off like some of the trainers do when they're more experienced, but I will, like, I'm just going to sit back and drink some tea, you two talk to each other for a bit. And it's great when they do, but I think it's important to show them that I'm still listening, and that's why I don't turn my camera off, because I'll use some TPR to encourage them to keep going. It's like, or sort of that kind of thing. And I mean, I think most of my students know now that if I do this, it means say more, make that sentence longer, or make a full sentence. So tell me more is something that I've actually taught a lot of my students to say. If they don't think their partner's given enough information, they're like, tell me more, I want to know more. And why? Again, getting them very, very early on to ask why of each other, especially if they're a reluctant speaker, because if they're a reluctant speaker, they can learn quite quickly that just by popping in to say why, one small word gets their classmate to talk longer, and they don't have to talk so much. So it's quite a nice trick for them to learn, but still they have to listen, so they still know what they're asking.
I think within what you're saying there is an important thing. If peer-to-peer is not working, identify the reason. Is it do they not have the language? Are they simply anxious and worried about not performing well? Are they being deliberately obtuse? They can speak, but choose not to. If you can figure out what the issue is, you can probably address it better.
Yeah, and sometimes they really just have bad days, don't they? They really do.
Yes,
they really
absolutely.
Do. And it's
important
to recognize
they're
that.
Exhausted, some of these kids. Totally exhausted after very long days, a lot of them.
But if it's just a one-off bad day, then the teacher should be able to recognize that. So just recognizing what the student really needs is quite important sometimes.
I think you're absolutely spot on, and I'm also thinking, the other when we have a little one. Hello, little one. I love it. Hello.
Nice hat.
Nice.
She just came back from nursery, and it's her birthday tomorrow, but nursery's closed tomorrow. How old are you tomorrow? How many years old will you be tomorrow? 1.
I think I can guess.
On the hat.
Oh, someone's come to join me too.
I love it. Oh, it's so nice. I just think it's so nice to have this sort of interaction between us teachers at Wales. We all see each other on Facebook, but I really hope that we're going to be able to do more and more of these and just take and run with it. Because it's just really, it's really useful because we can share our professional experience, which is all different, and we're all learning from each other. And B, it just helps to sort of bring people together. Is there anything else you particularly want to say around any elements of making peer-to-peer work really dynamic and successful? Is there anything else?
I think something quite important that may or may not go down too well with TQD, but on the whole, TQD seem to kind of quite like what I do. But I think it's really important not to think that the lesson in front of you is so completely rigid that you can't suit the students. I adapt all of my lessons. I don't annotate in advance or anything, but I know my students. I adapt the lesson to suit them. I know that if I'm teaching GKB to these students and then again to these students, I have to up my game for these ones to extend and extend and extend. I have to up my game for these ones to actually work to come down to the level they're at, which is a lot different from where the other students are. So I am literally doing the exact same lesson material in a very, very, very different way. And I think some teachers get very stressed by, but it says we must do this on the teacher guide, and forget that they're dealing with individual students who they have got to know. And if you know that your student can't answer the questions on this ORT slide because they're above level, dumb them down. I mean, I'm forever taking out a couple of words in some questions just to simplify the question, or blocking them off and writing a much, much simpler question or a harder one. Or and just adjusting the material a little bit.
You have to. Because, I mean, for example, with the ORT, there are sections where it says before reading, but most of my students come to the class having read the book, which is
exactly. So you can't predict when you've already done it.
It's a bit of a pointless question. I mean, you can change it. So there are things which you need to. You have to adapt the material, and I don't think Wales would have a problem with that.
No, as long as you're professional and do what you need to do.
Yeah, and get to the goals. What about you, James? Before we sort of wrap this up, what other things do you feel are particularly important to address that we may not have covered?
I mean, just one thing that I find I'm using more of is that I try and put in a 2 or 3 minute video at about the 25-minute mark, just to give them a break. But it's always relevant to the lesson. I get a YouTube video, and for example, we were doing the writing lesson where there was I can't remember what it was. It's G1A, how to write like a scientist, and it can be a slog, that lesson, because the material doesn't encourage a lot of student interaction if you stick with the slides there.
Yes, it's very teacher talk heavy, that one.
Yeah, so I go off. So for example, I got a video, 3-minute video, National Geographic video, is fantastic, of porcupines and how porcupines fire their quills. And suddenly what was a slightly difficult lesson became alive. They were chatting away about these porcupines and how they attack, and seeing animals with porcupine quills stuck in their faces, and so it makes a big difference, just from an energy point of view, to try and put something in there, because videos, pictures are good, but videos, I think students, respond so much quicker. So if you can slide in a video for short 2 or 3 minute, relevant to the lesson, I think that's probably one of the things I find really helps with energy levels throughout the lesson.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely idea. I think something I'm thinking of is one of my G3 classes. I don't know if you're teaching GCA, Reach. Oh my good grief, the content to get through is just.
Don't say that. I've only just started it.
It's a lot, and it's a shame because you think there's potential to have some really great discussions, and sometimes it's quite hard. But for instance, we just did one, and the idea was to show a video on. They were talking about they've been doing nature out of balance, and I found this fantastic video about the mega fish man, I think it is. There's this one, and they're based in the Mekong, and I found the exact guy, and they have this brief video. It's wonderful. And so I sort of, they were we were all there sort of thinking, okay, we've got so much to get through, but this is worth doing. And I showed this video to them, and you could, as James says, you could just see them go,
Yeah.
all of this comes back into context. And then I said, right, let's ask questions about it. And you're both teachers, and I did the cup of tea in the background and let them go.
Yeah.
But as a result, you know, oh my good grief, was I up against it at the end? You know, because that's the way.
You know the critter cam lesson. I mean, find a video of them trying to put a critter cam on a great white shark. It is. It's just mind blowing. Because these videos, these National Geographic ones are great because they're usually 2 or 3 minutes. And I really will. If the video is longer than 3 minutes, I will not show the whole thing. I think it should never be longer than 3 minutes. I would say that would be.
Yeah.
But that gives you 3 minutes of video is enormous.
It's huge.
Amount to talk about,
especially if they're talking, and you know, because obviously I show video to lower level, and often I'm not trying to necessarily find one that they will understand, but that visually stimulates them as well. So yeah, I mean, I'll go in and just sort of find maybe a 10-minute video, but if I can find a minute and a half of relevant content,
a little.
That's great. But yeah, I think it's good, and I think all of these things, for, you know, going right back to where we started, and I was saying that, you know, for teachers and people watching this who are questioning, you know, am I doing peer-to-peer correctly? How can I best extend? How can I best get my children, my students, to really engage with the material, etc.? I think at the end of the day, you know, Wales really puts a lot of importance on peer-to-peer. And that it is something that is fairly unique to Wales, because they have got these two student to class, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And you know, I just think the information that you've shared and that Penny shared at the beginning has been really, really helpful. I've certainly learned quite a lot. Before we go, is there any one more top piece of peer-to-peer advice you'd want to go?
Just something that you just said about teachers and peer-to-peer. Something I notice on our forum is a lot of teachers say they can't do peer-to-peer. They get marked down for it in evaluations because my students are only 4, they can't talk. And I think the really important thing to say is, as long as we try and model it and give them, say hello to Tommy. If he doesn't say hello, you can't force it, but you're still encouraging. It's like, say hello to Tommy, and again, get your puppet back and hello. So you're still modeling, encouraging, setting the standard for what you're aiming for. So I don't think teachers should just write it off. He can't do it. He will do it. We just have to give them the scaffolding to learn how to do it.
Consistently do it every single lesson and several times a lesson. Very good point, Jeanette. And James, sorry.
I think just important to remember the point of peer-to-peer, which is we learn by relearning, and we have to do it over and over again, and we forget that sometimes. We think we're sitting there listening and saying, are they using new language? Is this relevant to the thing? But it doesn't really matter, because if they're coming out with good language, that is, you know, really getting that language burnt into the brain, and that's what the point of peer-to-peer is. So worth remembering, I think, when we're doing peer-to-peer.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, folks, I think that was a very, very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for coming in and doing this after your lessons today.
A pleasure.
And we're going to have to do this.
My day off.
It was your day off. I had 4 hours of lessons beforehand. But I will see you both in the Facebook group, and just a huge thank you for doing this. It's really great, and I hope people get a lot of worth from listening to you guys talking to each other, because I think it was just brilliant. Lots of brilliant ideas. Thank you. So I'm going to say goodbye. Have a wonderful afternoon, and see you in Facebook. And
thank you for organising that. It was very good.
Bye,
very good
bye,
conversation.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done. Bye. So there we go. I hope that was of use to you. I hope you enjoyed a cup of tea while you were listening to it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.